Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Top Cut breakdown video. In today's video, we're going to do quite a few things, so follow me here. We're going to go over two zenkai events, one of which was in America, one of which was in EU. We're going to use the data from those events to try to make some inferences as we go into Nationals coming up very soon. And then we're going to talk about the new boogeyman of the constructed Dragon Ball Super format removed from the Zenkai Cup. And this is going to be highly relevant going into Nationals unless we get some sort of emergency ban list or errata, which some players are calling for. I kind of doubt it, but I mean, who knows if it'll happen. We've already gotten two lists technically, from the release of Fighter's Ambition to Nationals. Firstly, the actual just ban list for the set where they hit Broly Crown, where they hit Vegeta Resolve Renewed, that kind of thing. And they also released the recent errata list where they updated things like Magenta, the blue super combo for the Gohan deck of all things. So yeah, who knows if we'll get an emergency ban list before Nationals. It's possible. I doubt it, but maybe. But yeah, we'll go over all that in today's video and we'll try to get some good data going into Nationals. That being said though, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. That being said, let's jump right on in talking about our first event, the online American Zenkai Cup, 82 players, 7 rounds, BO1, top 8. Now, why do I want to talk about this in relation to the current format? Well, for one thing, I want to go over the first place Gogeta list and just see what kind of text people are playing, because there were a lot of hits to red. While those hits were not direct to SS4 Gogeta, it's still worth taking a look at these lists and seeing, what replaced Resolve Renewed, what's going on with Broly Crown now that it's errated. We'll take a look at that list and kind of make some inferences about that. The second thing, though, is, of course, you can see here there are 6 SS4 Gogetas in this top 8. Shout out to my boy Josue for coming in 3rd place with SS4 Vegeta ramp, which I think is actually very difficult to do in this format. I'll talk about why in a second. And then we rounded up with 1 reboot pan in this top 8. Okay. Obviously an insane concentration in red, particularly here SS4 Gogeta, but I don't think this necessarily completely reflects the constructed regular format, because you have to keep in mind that the Zenkai Cup only allows you to play with a certain list of leaders, and that is any leader that came out in Zenkai series or any leader that received support from Zenkai series. So that's mainly the legacy support from Anniversary Box, one of which is SS4 Vegeta ramp, which got the new Bulma card out of the Anniversary Box. So that was an eligible blue deck. Now, I think when it comes to blue decks in the constructed format, there are basically 2 types of blue decks. One is a deck like SS4 Vegeta ramp or Beerus ramp, which are your hardcore blue ramp decks. They want to ramp to a high amount of energy, play bombs, win the game via a control route, probably rely on a lot of floodgates throughout the early and mid game to try and get there. I think those decks are very hard to play into red going second. Going first got a lot better because of the hits to Resolve Renewed, because of the hits to Broly Crown, all that kind of stuff. Going first as these slower ramp decks did get a lot better, but going second against Sin, Gogeta, and other red strategies that can be very aggressive, I find personally very difficult. Like, for one thing, I've been testing a lot of Beerus ramp for Nationals, and it's very difficult to go second against these red decks. It's doable, but it's difficult. That being said, there's another type of blue deck that I think is relevant in the format, which I'm sure you all know about, but maybe you haven't heard it kind of explained this way. The other type of blue deck is a mid-range blue deck, namely Gamma and SS3 Reboot. The reason these decks are more mid-range rather than control is because they don't really play for super high-end bombs. In the case of SS3 Reboot, you kind of can't play for high-end bombs because you're tied to 6 energy per game. But yeah, you're playing these types of blue decks like an untap 3 per turn, which got a lot better since Broly Crown is way less punishing against those strategies now, having to be hard casted instead of the ability to free play it off the SS4 Gogeta unison. And you have all this excess energy to play defense against these aggressive red decks, which sometimes the ramp decks don't really have. The ramp decks have to dedicate energy in order to ramp, which means sometimes your defense is kind of lacking. In SS3, you could tap out for a bomb, untap 4 via your leader and a Boo unison, and bam, you have 4 energy for Ready to Rumble. Vegeta ramp, you might, use your energy to use UI Kamehameha, and you wouldn't have the available energy to, Ready to Rumble, let's just say, as examples. So yeah, I think those are the 2 main blue decks. The mid-range blue decks are pretty much excluded from Zenkai Cup, so I would not take this data to say that red is going to be too overbearing going into Nationals. I still think red is one of the best colors in the game going into Nats, but I don't think it's going to be this far skewed. Maybe I'm wrong, but anyways, let's jump over to that first place Gogeta list and take a look at what we're playing here. Alrighty, we've got the first place list here. Let's take a scan through. So the first 2 cards you'll notice are Protector of the People and King Vegeta's Imposing Presence. I don't see any Violent Rays in the main deck here because, of course, the card was errated into a very fringe case. I don't want to say unplayable because there are still matchups where Violent Rays can be good for the battle card negation, But yeah, it's not as generically main deckable as it once was. So in this list, we're choosing to go with 2 Protector of the People and 3 King Vegeta Imposing Presence. I think many players will look to King Vegeta's Imposing Presence as sort of a replacement for Violent Rays. I mean, they're good against different things. Like pre-errata Violent Rays is still better against like higher end stuff, but King Vegeta's is very good against 15k and 20k spam. But the cool thing about Gogeta is you can pair that with SS4 Goku Digging Deep. That's 5k on your leader, which is essentially a Sensu Bean. And King Vegeta's is kind of like an inverse Sensu Bean because it gives everything your opponent attacks with -5. So you're creating a 10k power differential between your leader's base power and your opponent's battle card's base power, which is going to make defending your turns a whole lot easier. And then on top of that, this list is teching 2 Protector of the People, which I think is really good for the Sin matchup. Maybe just a little bit less good against Gogeta. Not that Gogeta doesn't swing with a ton of battle cards, but one of the main focuses of Gogeta is also playing the Unison, which can play around Protector to somewhat of a degree. But yeah, it's still going to be good against your red decks for sure. 2 Wolfang Fist, incredible card in Gogeta. It's really good against a lot of the random Zenkai cards. There's a lot of like 15k dual attackers or 15k attackers period that like combo from the drop, and Wolfang is just really good against those cards. Now 2 Broly Crown. I want to talk about this for a second. I don't know if I would have went into a BO1 playing 2 Broly Crown. I understand you have to like make space and the card got technically worse, but I think because of all the hits to red, the blue matchup for red did get a lot more difficult. So I feel like to hedge my bets, I'd still want 3 to 4 Broly Crown, as crazy as that does sound. Again, because like those blue matchups are harder. But I guess on the flip side, for Zenkai Cup specifically, again, SS3 and Gamma are non-factors. So Broly Crown's actually probably a little bit worse. I guess what I'm meaning to say is like if this was a regular constructed format BO1, I'd probably want 3 to 4 Broly Crowns, but for Zenkai Cup, actually probably does make a lot of sense. Moving on though to Omen of Awakening. Of course, we're looking for a card to replace Vegeta Resolve Renewed, and Omen of Awakening is one of your options. Since you play a 2-cost Unison in this deck, it is a potential 1-cost answer that unfortunately crits a life, but it does hit things 20k and under, which is nice because it's a 1 energy out to Ready to Rumble. Vegeta Resolve Renewed was not that type of answer before, so that's pretty nice. Looking along the rest of the deck, the 1 Sad Yamcha is still there. The 1 Unbreakable I think is a cool tech because you can search it for your turn 1, and the rest of the list looks pretty standard. But yeah, I wanted to talk about the change in negate lineup, the change in counterplay lineup. I think that's all pretty relevant for you guys going into nationals that might be playing this deck. All right, moving into the next event, we have the European Zenkai Cup. Unfortunately, I don't have deck lists to this event. I don't remember if I mentioned it, but I do have deck lists to the American event down in the description on the Crossworld Facebook page, so check that out down in the description. But yeah, this one's a lot more sad to look at because it's just like all top 16 red except for 1 blue Future Trunks player. Like, these blue players managed to sneak it in, and they must be really practiced with their decks because, again, like Future Trunks, other blue ramp deck, I think it's somewhat tough to go second against these red decks. But yeah, this one has a more healthy balance of Gogeta and Sin. It seems like Gogeta is a bit more overrepresented, but Sin's still in there at a pretty healthy amount, and I think that Sin is going to be a very popular deck going into nationals, of course, as well as SS4 Gogeta. But again, with the introduction of the blue mid-range decks, like SS3 and Gamma, I think those are also decks that are going to be very popular because they're pretty good against these red decks. So yeah, not much to talk about here because I don't have deck lists, but yeah, I mean, Zenkai Cup could have been cool. I mean, I talked about it in a previous video. The prizing could have definitely been better, although those promo Vegetas and Gokus, the Z deck cards, those are definitely pretty solid ones because they're, obviously main characters. They'll probably fetch a pretty decent amount of money, just off my guess. But yeah, this format, not the most enjoyable to play in. But anyways, moving on from Zenkai Cup stuff, let's talk about the new Boogeyman in the constructed format. That is Set 6 Gogeta. What is this deck all about? Well, if you haven't heard about it, you probably did if you're a part of the Facebook groups and everything. But basically, a player found a way to turn 2 kill, potentially on your opponent's 1 energy kill, with this leader and the new Z support in the form of SS Gogeta facing fierce foes. So the thing about the leader is you pitch Goku and Vegeta BRs to draw cards as well as take life. So you do have very good control of your life. And when you're trying to kill on turn 1, turn 2, you're trying to take yourself down to 1 life if possible. We know that from like the Reboot Gohan days, the Hurrigarn Storm days, where you just play Bardock over and over again, take your life, get every single card possible, try and kill your opponent with. The other crazy thing about this leader, which I think is actually, in my personal opinion, the most broken thing about the deck, is that you can turn off 2 cost or higher counters. That is so highly relevant because of blocker negates. Like, there are so many times like I've tested against this deck and a blocker negate would just save me the turn, but no, I can't use it because the leader shuts it off. That's pretty broken. But what this Z battle card does, I think a lot of people overlooked, is that it doesn't have an energy restriction for the activate main of 1 energy to play a red Gogeta BR at the cost of 8. So you can play SSB Gogeta critical combination over this guy, which is a dual attack triple striker. It's essentially a vanilla except for those abilities. But, you know, when you're on 1 energy and your opponent's on 2, that early in the game, that type of card is very threatening in and of itself. Like, if you didn't happen to open a blocker negate, you know, needless to say, if they haven't proc their leader effect yet, if you didn't open a blocker negate, that's like a lot of damage you probably can't really deal with. And the other thing on top of that is it's a 35k red sand, which you can then crack into SS4 Broly the Great Destroyer. The really crazy thing about this is that Sin Shenron and SS4 Gogeta cannot do practically anything when this card hits the board on turn 2. Like, there's nothing in those main decks that actually deal with this barrier battle card. All your 5k combos become 0k combos, your super combos become 5ks. It's a really bad situation. Now, on the flip side, you've got like blue decks that do play a fair amount of barrier removal, so as long as you can survive that onslaught turn, you might be okay. Yellow, same thing, you've got a pretty fair amount of barrier removal, so if you can survive the onslaught, you should be okay. There are some things you can do if the Gogeta player gets a bit greedy. Like, there are a lot of decks that can actually take out the Gogeta mid-battle, and you might get an opportunity to do that because let's just say your opponent wants to attack with their leader to get the activate battle off. Well, you might be able to do some sort of arrival play or, you know, counter attack or combo trick that kills the SS Gogeta Z battle card. The other thing too is you're slightly incentivized to attack with the Gogeta Z battle card because it can play the Gogeta 8 cost on top of it in active mode. So you could theoretically attack with this for 15k, activate main, pay 1, put critical combination on top in active mode and get 2 more attacks. That would be the full value way to do it. But again, there's so many battle tricks that can interrupt this thing during combat that that's like a really, really greedy play, unless you know for certain your opponent has no way to do that with their resources available to them. But yeah, this deck is actually super SCR or bust. I haven't run the numbers on it personally, but you know, the known creator of the deck and other people that have talked about it say the likelihood is very, very high because there are several ways to search it. I don't know if I believe numbers as high as 70-60%, but that's the number I've heard tossed around. That's how likely you are to see the SCR. But yeah, this deck can be a menace. If it hits all cylinders, this deck can be very, very unfair. It's the first like potential turn 2 kill deck we've seen in a very, very long time. Like, I haven't seen a game end on turn 4 or less, or I guess I should say on turn 3 or less, in a really long time. Unless you're playing a deck that takes a lot of its own life, I have not seen a deck lose on turn 3 in quite some time. But yeah, I mean, this deck can be very degenerate if you have the SCR. I'm definitely open to doing a how to counter video. It's definitely pretty hard to counter this thing if they hit on all cylinders, but there are some ways to deal with it we can talk about. If you guys want to see a video on that, drop it in the comments, let me know. I'll definitely be glad to cover that. But anyways, guys, that's what I got for you today. Some stuff going into nationals we can even glean from Zenkai Cup, which is a different format, but there's still stuff to go over and absorb. But anyways, let me know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.